Beyond the fence line, where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun. The sagebrush whispers, the rivers hum. This land's a story just begun. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. Boots hit gravel and the prairie sings. With every hoofbeat, the frontier rings. From ranchers' hands to miners' veins, the spirit of the West remains. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. So come ride with me through the dust and time. Find the soul of Wyoming beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line, beyond the fence beyond the fence line, where the wild winds run, where the skies stretch wide and kiss the sun.
Hey, good morning, Wyoming. Well, it's Tuesday, January 27th. Great to be here this morning. Hope you guys are doing well. Joseph Kibler here, your candidate for Wyoming governor. And today, I'm going to talk about where I stand on public lands. I know this has been kind of a hot topic around the water cooler these days. And also, I'm going to talk about Jason Washerburgers, our legislator, who has put forth this idea of creating homestead clusters, which just happened last week. So I'm going to totally talk about that today after I talk about where I generally stand on Wyoming public lands, why this matters, who owns what in Wyoming and what are the challenges. How can we grow together? What can we do with this land? How can we manage it? How can the public still enjoy these lands? You know, and a lot of us don't get out to enjoy the land as much as we'd like. I mean, I'm a big camper, love getting out, but I don't get out nearly as much as I'd like to camp, hike, and things like that. I think a lot of us who love the outdoors, like I do, don't get out as much as we'd like due to work, life, things like that. But, anyways, hope you guys are doing well. I have to admit, I was up all night the night before last, and so got a good night's sleep last night. So I'm kind of still waking up. Not a coffee drinker here, so I wake up on my natural and my own accord here in the morning. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Wyoming lands. So first, I wanted to just mention. So the federal government owns right around 49% of Wyoming land, approximately 29 million acres or so, roughly, in Wyoming. And the state owns roughly around 5.6% of the land, or, depending on who you talk to or what things you look at. We've got, 3.5 to 4 million acres in different, state land trusts, institutions, things like that, that the state owns. And so the real question is what do we do with this land? Obviously you're curious, where do I stand on public land? But what do we do with it? How do we be good stewards of it and manage it? And as I get into that, what I want to do is I want to back up to the last legislative session in 2025, where the Wyoming legislature wanted to go ahead and have the federal land transferred into state care or state management. I actually was not in favor of that bill for one primary reason, and that was this. There was no plan after that. Let's get all the land. Are we going to manage it? Are we going to sell it? Are we going to trade it? Are we going to give it away? It was sort of ambiguous as to what was going to happen to 29 million acres if we got it from the federal government. Now, of course, that didn't include national parks and things like that. So I was not in favor of that bill because what I want to see is bills that actually have a plan and a solution tied to them. The second thing I want to mention is, as we all know, the one big beautiful bill last year had sort of this somewhat detailed but kind of an ambiguous land language in there where they were going to sell a bunch of land for development and things like this. The problem with that bill was this. Again, it was sort of ambiguous. It didn't have a lot of detail. It had enough detail to make us think, okay, you know what? We're going to sell a little bit of land around our cities. We're going to clear up some of this land that's blocked out by the BLM. And we're going to do some sensible stuff and get that land into the private sector. Well, if you had read the language in the big, beautiful bill, and that's why so many of us were sort of fighting it, it was just detailed enough to almost get you to buy into it, but not detailed enough to where they wouldn't just end up doing whatever they wanted, selling this land to massive corporate buyers, giving it away to their buddies, what have you. It just lacked the details required for the people to get behind it. And so, where do we find this balance in management of public land and the desire for economic growth, or, that fake term called affordable housing? By the way, that's just a buzzword that really doesn't mean anything. It's not affordable housing, especially for those of us taxpayers that are involved in it. So, where do I stand when it comes to public land? Wyoming has a lot of land that's landlocked, that's tied up. We've got land that is around communities and in communities that's bound up in the federal government, state government, and this land cannot be used for economic development or for community development or anything like that. So, from a bird's eye view, what I would like to see when it comes to the management of these public lands, I really just want to see us come up with a plan. Okay, we've got this land around, I'm going to pick somebody, Lander. I'm just going to say Lander. We've got this land that's locked up around Lander or in Lander. And, it would behoove us to sell that to perhaps create community centers or parks or to create some additional housing and things like that. Let's be really mindful of what we're going to do with that rather than just sort of leaving this ambiguous. Well, we might sell it, we might give it away, we might trade it. Let's be detailed with how we're going to manage our public land and what we're going to do with our public land. It would make sense to me to look and listen to our local voices when it comes to this land management. So I know we love to manage everything from DC, or we love to manage everything from the capital here in Cheyenne. But let's get into our local communities. What do you guys want to do with this economic development? What do you guys want to do with this land? So I think the local voices are what matters most when it comes to how we manage our land. Now let's talk about land access and this checkerboard situation that we've got along the railroads and things like that, where we have that issue of corner crossing, in order to access public land or even for hunting and things like that. I think we should really, really sit down. Let's have a conversation about opening this land up. And what do I mean by that? That might mean that we do some trading, right? Maybe we do some trading, get rid of these checkerboards so that public land is clear and accessible. You know, I would like to see, these giant corporate conglomerates of ranching farmers, AG. Let's make a way for the public to access the land that is theirs. But not only that, making it accessible, but also being good stewards of the land. And that is part of why I wasn't in favor of the bill the legislature was trying to pass last session. I wasn't in favor of the land uh, sale stuff in the One Big Beautiful Bill because it didn't talk about stewardship. It didn't talk about a clear path about what we're going to do to this land. How are we going to do it? What are we going to do with it? Are we going to graze? Are we going to hunt? Are we going to recreate? Are we going to do energy development? Are we going to do conservation? And how can all of those things work together? I think one of the biggest things for me when it comes to public land, and I said it before, is let's just make a plan, you guys. Let's actually make a plan. I'm going to talk in a minute about a recent bill that was brought forth by Jacob Wasserberger here in the legislature about potentially selling land for $1 an acre to families to create these homestead clusters. I'm going to talk about, I kind of like that. I think that's headed somewhere in the right direction about what we need to do. And I'm going to, kind of try to unpack that a little bit because I think it's important to have that conversation. The other thing I want to talk about is, really taking a step back and going, I think at some point, I think it would be nice if the state managed the land that's in the state, and that did come from the federal government. But I want to see a plan for that. Secondarily, I want to see the land going back to the people. I think that is so, so, so important. Government currently owns over 55-ish percent of this state, right? Where it's in government's hand. How can we truly get the land back to the people? I happen to know that the Constitutional Party as well also kind of has a homestead plan for this. But I want to talk about this homestead idea. But before I talk about that and where I stand on that, we've got other problems we would have to fix before we could truly look at going back to sort of this idea of homesteading or creating perhaps small farm operations or small homesteads, and that is addressing this issue of bureaucracy and ownership and management. You see, we have America has lost, I think it's over 200,000 small farms and ranches, homesteads in the last couple of years. This is because of corporate subsidized bureaucracy for large operations that make the market untenable for people like you and me. You see, they drive costs down and do whatever it is they do through subsidies and bureaucracy, thus pricing anyone who is trying to do a smaller operation out of the market completely. So before we, have this idea of, well, gee, we'd love to create homesteads in Wyoming and small ranches and small farms, we have to eliminate the issues and barriers that have kind of caused that segment of our community and our culture to die. So we have to look at that. We have to consider that. So let's keep public lands managed and in public hands and conserved and thoughtfully developed so that we can grow as a state and our communities can grow. Some of our communities are landlocked. How do we free that up so our communities can grow in a meaningful and a purposeful way? Let's do it in a managed way where local voices matter most, but where we have the actual conversations that need to be done. And you know what? It's different for Hot Springs than it is for Bar None or Casper or Sheridan or Thermopolis or any community across the state, Torrington. The local solutions matter more than sort of this big overarching solution. So I'm because I'm an outdoors person. I love public lands. I want to see us manage them well. I want to see us handle them well. I don't want to see us just selling them off to the highest bidder, because I think that's what a lot of us are afraid of. If the state gets a hold of the land, we're just going to sell it off to the highest bidder and increase sort of this corporate control over our land, over our resources, when we really, what we need to be doing is giving it back or getting it back to the people in meaningful ways. So let's go to this recent bill, actually last week. So it's great for this conversation that was put forth. And the idea here was to sell 30,000 to 200,000 acres, 10-acre parcels, I think like in 3,000 acre areas. So I think it's like, 300 homestead, like 10 up to 25 acres, as low as 10 acres. These homesteads, sell them for $1 per acre. And the idea here is that you would help address some of the housing shortage that we have here in Wyoming. And there would be a lot of, well, I'm going to call it what it is, bureaucratic restrictions to this idea, where you couldn't Airbnb and you couldn't resell it and companies couldn't buy it. And, you'd have to stay in it for a certain period of time. And so you couldn't sell it to large developers. And you'd have to be committed to, keeping it for a period of time. You couldn't just turn it around and sell it, all of these things. I think this idea on its face has some merit. And here's the core reason why I believe that. We are giving the land or getting the land back in the hands of the people. And I like that idea. I like the concept. I like the principle of that. And I know they're working out a bunch of particulars about this, but the idea was to encourage people to go back to homesteading, to kind of maybe perhaps ease our home, crisis, our housing crisis, so to speak. But I think in order to do this, we have to solve some of the other problems with bureaucracy for something like this to work well. And the other thing is it's already been said, well, this land doesn't exist in these sorts of acreage and in these sorts of, scenarios. Joseph, there's not 3,000 acres somewhere in Wyoming where we could split it up into 10-acre parcels or 25-acre parcels and sell it to people. That doesn't exist. Well, that's interesting to me, because we've got like 35 million acres owned by government, and you're telling me we can't find anything to give back to the people. I think that's kind of interesting, and I think it's worth looking at a little bit more. So this bill, I think, is an idea that is, in my mind, probably in the right direction to get some land back in the hands of the people. The idea of homesteading. But, like I said, I think there are some other issues that we have to solve in bureaucracy before we could go down this path of perhaps giving or getting the land back to the people. So to sum this up this morning, when it comes to public lands, and this isn't going to be a super long episode this morning because I know where I stand on public land. The local voices matter. We need to have stewardship. We need to have a plan to manage it. We need to have access. The public needs to have access to these lands. And we shouldn't have this just sort of carte blanche. Let's take all of the land and then figure out what to do with it later. Of course, that ends in a way that none of us, in a result or a way that none of us would want to happen. So let's make a plan for Wyoming land. The future matters for our kids. I think the priority should be getting the land back in the hands of the people. But let's get bureaucracy out of the way to get that land back into the hands of the people. Obviously, we're not going to compromise our national parks, our state parks, our most treasured resources, and sell those off to massive developments or developers. We're not going to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to see that. But we've got a lot of land in Wyoming that could be used by the people or used by community ranches, operations, or endeavors. So I think there's an opportunity there for our communities to grow. But let's do it all in a way that benefits the people. It doesn't benefit government, doesn't benefit bureaucracy, doesn't benefit large corporate partnerships, but actually benefits and brings worth and value to the people. And that's me on Wyoming lands. Will be interesting to see what happens with HB or House Bill 55 that Mr. Jason Washerberger has put forth about these homestead clusters. I think that's an idea in the right direction, getting land back to people. Anyways, thanks for watching, you guys. Have a blessed day. Stay warm out there. It's a little chilly, a lot of weather going around, stuff like that. Take care, and God bless you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about what's going on at the federal government level and in the world. We're going to talk about what I view as just sort of more of the same coming out of Washington, kind of the great deception. Republicans passed a whole bunch of funding bills the last week and a half or so. And guess what? We're funding everything we asked them to stop funding. So that'll be an interesting conversation tomorrow. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about private property. Where do I stand on private property rights? Does your private property rights, stop, if your operations on your private property affect the value of my property, things like that. I'm going to talk about that on Thursday. And then on Friday, you're going to meet me in a personal way. I'm going to talk about my family, my testimony. You're going to meet my family, and we're just going to kind of have a round table. I'm going to tell you about my life, where I've come from, where I'm going, why I'm here, and what we're doing. So with that, I know I've kind of closed this show like 3 times today, haven't I? Well, God bless you guys. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a nice day. Take care. Bye now.
That welcome sign on I-25, paint ship still standing proud. Red hands lean on rusty gates, reading weather in the clouds. Antelope on the edges, cold dust on our jeans. Oryx blanket on the rim like a string of prairie dreams. Wyoming wind, you shove those semis sideways on the line, make a 20-foot wall of white in a single night. Drag those tumbleweeds till they're stacked up tight on the old barbed wire. Carry smoke from a branding fire. You steal my hat, you sting my skin, but I was raised by that Wyoming wind. Red dirt stuck in busted boots, pickup rattling down 14. Feedlot steaming, the dim sunrise, snow geese cutting clean. Elk tracks in the timber, sagebrush oceans roll. We pull our hoods tight at the pump, the gust cuts through the soul. You push our trash clear to Nebraska, strip a billboard to the nails, slam a screen door off its hinges, shake the grain out of the rails. You whistle through those coal cars, howl across the powder rim. Every fence line, every windburn grin got carved by you again. Wyoming wind, you shove those semis sideways on the line, make it 20-foot wall of white in a single night. Drag those tumbleweeds till their strings of tide on the old barbed wire. Carry smoke from a burning fire. You steal my hat, you sting my skin. But I was raised by that Wyoming wind. Dirt stuck in busted boots, pick up right around 14. Feedlot steaming, the dim sunrise, snow geese couldn't clean. Elk tracks in the timber, sagebrush oceans roll. We pull our hoods tight at the pump, the gust cuts through the song.